is a place where you will be secure. And when you're thinking about the decisions that you need to make into the future, imagine having a trusted ally by your side always. That's the I&M Bank promise. We empower you with tools and support, says trust your aspirations and turn them into reality. So think about it. Whether it's entering into a new business venture, your child's education, or securing your future, I&M Bank is here for you. From flexible financial solutions to personalized guidance, we are on your side, championing your progress and celebrating your successes. So don't just bank, build your future with a partner who actually believes in you. And you can experience the power of on your side banking. Find out more at any I&M Bank branch close to you. And remember, I&M Bank is on your side. And as we get into these conversations this morning, a lot has been happening around the region. There have been talks around what's happening diplomatically. There have been talks in the area of foreign policy. And if we have had diplomatic faux pas over the last few months, and to assist us in having that conversation this morning, there's a man who has made his thoughts clear to folks in the recent past about what should actually happen diplomatically, and to ask questions about what are we really doing. We had a conversation with him previously about Kenya's foreign policy and what exactly the position is with that. Joining us in the hot seat this morning, and we see a very good big situation room welcome to Professor Kagwanja. It has been too long since you've been in the hot seat, Prof. The CEO of the Africa Policy Institute is here with us this morning. Prof, good morning.
Thank you. I thought it was cool, this seat. I was almost asking for a heater below.
Oh, don't worry. Let's just...
I get it.
I get it. I know what you were doing.
So you're warning me.
No. I'm just letting you know how things are.
They are going to be very hot.
They are already hot in the region. This is where we are, isn't it, Prof?
That's true. That is true.
It is.
Yes.
Before we do get there, though, how about we welcome you to the show with today's proverb, right?
Yeah.
This proverb is from the Lusophone country of Mozambique, right? And this morning, the Mozambicans say a very interesting thing, that fire devours the grass, but not the root. Fire devours the grass, but not the root. Your take on that?
Wow. Well, I'm imagining that there is no ultimate victor. At some stage, you have to give ground, because I think we are more or less saying that unless you're divine, you can't deal with everything.
This is true.
However powerful you are, at some stage you get your checkmate. Yeah.
At some point you have to find it. We're looking at issues to do with what is happening in the region. We look at East Africa specifically, of course, and what we're calling transnational repression in East Africa. That there looks to be a state of repression in Kenya, and it's very glaringly so, whereby it would appear as though you say a thing or another, where I do believe that Kenya has a certain element of freedom of speech and expression. Because if we were to compare to other jurisdictions on this continent, it is not that easy. You would not be able to take a walk in the street after saying something in a particular nature. However, there is the general view that there is some punishment for the expression of these views, and then it could be seen as repression. And it seems to have bitten in other nations in the community as well. Or it was resident in those, and Kenya's the one who caught the flu. So what are we looking at? And there are certain events that point to this, of course. Whether we're looking at the whole, month-long conflict that happens in Kenya during the finance bill protests, or if you want to look at what we most recently have been privy to, what has happened in Tanzania and what continues to happen. What are we looking at when we say there's transnational repression?
Let me start, basically, because you've raised quite a number of issues that would be very important for the listeners, and that it would only be good to give them a more broad brush than very, very concrete. Not because I fear that the devil is in the details, but the fact that we would run out of time. But there's very, very important issues to observe as to why we find ourselves in this situation as Kenyans. Obviously, when the new government came to power, and I'm saying this for the 100th time, this is not new, we did not respect what makes us. And what makes us is meritocracy, because we are a nation that is scarce of resources of all kinds. And the only thing we can do is to be just and fair and following a system of merit, a merit-based society. That's what we ought to be. Now, our foreign policy is on the ropes because we messed up from the beginning. I just look at where, my friend, I say my friend because he is Chief Minister Mudavadi is. And I wonder whether there's any advisor in this government. That government, and it is government 101, is that there is home affairs and there is foreign affairs. And those two dockets require very specialized skills. For some lifetime training in order to be, exquisite in terms of your skills. Here we are in a country where we have merged the two. Home affairs and internal affairs and foreign affairs. And two, when you go to foreign affairs, you'll have senior officers who have never even had a rent outside the country or toured more than 10 countries. Or they are competent in other areas other than what they are appointed to.
Yeah.
And there is something in English language called you are promoted into incompetence. Not because somebody does not wish you well, but where you have been taken, you can only prove to be incompetent because you have no competence for that area. So very good, gifted Kenyans with a great talent are basically in dockets which they have no clue what transpires there. Yet they are expert, well-known, respected expert in other areas. So this is where we find ourselves in Sudan. We're the same country that brokered the worst conflict in the region in Sudan and gave birth to a new nation called South Sudan. What happened to us? That we now find ourselves in the situation we are. Jomo Kenyatta in 1960, an old man got into the plane, and I imagine that the kind of planes we had in the 60s, to go and broker the peace between Kasavumbu and Patrice Lumumba. And when he could not travel more, they came here to find and see, or their officers came here to find and see. So we are a respected legion of power. Not because we have the strongest military in Africa, but because we have the strongest force, the moral force, what you can call, soft power. We have been the largest moral force. So when we mix the two in terms of our respect, then we put our foreign policy together. We tap into our moral force and we put the best and the ablest of our people to positions of authority. Is that what we're doing? No. That is not a criticism. It's not fair criticism. As a citizen of Kenya, I have the responsibility, who is educated the level that God has enabled us to be there, I have a moral duty to tell the government, Mudavadi is, to all intents and purposes, our prime minister. He has no business being a minister for foreign affairs. You get to appoint a minister for foreign affairs, and two, the whole bureaucracy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs need to be equipped with the people who would understand the sensitivities. Diplomacy is a game where you tell somebody to go to hell and they look forward to the trip. And even remind you, when are we going to hell? Because you put it in a diplomatic way. That's the whole essence of diplomacy,
Yeah.
So and to be that, to be a Munyongayaki, an Ongeri, and all those people who have manned our docket, it takes time. It takes time also to make networks on the continent and internationally, regionally. That's where we find ourselves that our own respected people. Mother Karua is not your ordinary, woman in the street. And forget my arrogance. She's not. She was a presidential candidate at one point.
She was a minister for justice and
she was minister for justice and minister for water. She's an exquisite lawyer, and here we are. She was a deputy, a running mate for a president who almost became president, and she's still strong. How can a country with which we have signed all manner of protocols of cooperation, including no passports? I travel on an Eastern African passport myself, and for the last five or so years, it is written East Africa but issued by Nairobi. That's it. So what does that mean? Somebody in that foreign office docket should have raised a finger and said, or made a call and said, we are talking to Tanzania. Don't tell us what you are doing. It's your business. But we are talking to Tanzania on this particular issue.
So is there a faux pas that has occurred here by nature of the expression of what we've seen? And is it that, obviously, if you sit at the hem of Mofa, the sentiments, the expression that you make, the things that you say, then would seem to carry the day for the country. Can we separate the words from the operation of foreign policy and diplomacy? Can we?
First and foremost, the good thing with the diplomacy and why it is called diplomacy is that when people are at war, you are still talking like there's no war. Because somebody has to give people hope. Somebody has to open the space for that negotiation or for that goodwill. And that is the role of diplomats. And, that's why elders, Mandelas and others, Jimmy Carter becomes, the quintessential diplomats, because over and above their moral force, they are also able to be respected by countries, and they can say things that others cannot say in a certain way and be respected. So the whole idea of foreign policy, that bureaucracy or that architecture, is something that is very, very deliberate. And you train your diplomats and even take them to countries that have, qualified or that are reputed to have the best, so that you have your best.
Did something wrong happen? I'm sorry, but I read some commentary yesterday, the day before, and that it says that we're making a hullabaloo out of really nothing, that there is no diplomatic tiff, there is nobody's quarreling with anybody else, that diplomatic relations are still intact. And that we're just making a mountain out of a molehill. We can say that there was a problem with the negotiations for DR Congo. We can say that there was a problem with allowing RSF to come and set up a parallel government here. We can say that maybe we blundered by, sending an envoy to Sudan and things like that. But here with Tanzania, not really. It's just a bump in the road and we're past it. Can we say that?
It's when a neighbor misbehaves. We as members of the public can tweet about that and say anything about that. It's within our domain because we are just public. That's who we are. That's it. But the government need to give a signal that it is willing, ready, and able to defend its citizens. And that's where you start with your diplomacy and say, we regret the event. We are talking with the Tanzania. And I'm sure we are going to get this done. What is this? Let's just forget about who Mother Karua is. Forget about who William Mutunga is. Forget about who all these are. But look at Mother Karua, for example. If she gets herself a job as a Kenyan to work abroad in the neighboring two countries, where she's hired as a lawyer because she's a qualified lawyer, even the Tanzanians agreed as such. When the deputy person was talking, said that this is a very, very accomplished lawyer. If to decide that my lawyer is going to be mother, the big question we're asking at the regional level is, will I be able to go and defend that kind of a person? We have had Cecil Mira and all other big dignitaries, if you remember the Jojo inquiry. We had all foreign lawyers, some from Ghana, others from wherever. We didn't deport them. They came and defended Jonjo, and the government put its team together to basically, try him. And therefore, the big question is, should mother or anybody else be sent back home like a criminal who doesn't deserve to enter Tanzania, and a presidential statement verifying her, and as a party statement verifying her, just because she's offering her services to a citizen of East Africa, and she herself carries a passport of East Africa? Can't Mama Suluhu just understand that? Is that so complicated? Is it nuclear science that she cannot understand that Mother Karua bears the passport of East Africa? That I bear a passport of East Africa?
But let me counter this argument from this direction. From her statement, just listening to her, there's the element of listening to what she's saying. She's not saying in what she's saying.
Yes.
And she almost alluded to the fact that these people, quote unquote, have been managed in their own country. They can't bring their business and drama to our country. All right, which seems to be they already have a brief of what's currently going on in Kenya. Of course, the embassies, they have intelligence officers who follow what's going on, and they brief. They will brief the president back there. My question is, with all this, it almost seems to look like they're obviously taking a stand, having known that at the moment Kenya lacks a core foreign policy identity.
Well, I see where you're coming from, and I think it's a very, very legitimate question. But this is the issue. Mother went to Uganda the day after, the day after she was sent back home to Kenya. And the case in Uganda is even worse because the man was extradited from here.
Yes.
I'm talking about Kizza Besigye. And mother went to the prison, did what she needed to do as a lawyer, and finished what she needed to do, and came back home yesterday evening. Which Kenyan know that mother was in Uganda representing Besigye? So Tanzania is where we were as Kenyans in 1992. That's where Tanzania is. And we need to sympathize with our neighbors. And I'm serious about this. I'm very serious. If I was invited to have a conversation with Mama, I would tell her, we had more in 1992 telling us that the moment we go to multi-party or we allow this multi-party, the country is going to disintegrate. That's fear-mongering. Kenya might be where we are. I am now talking about my brother, His Excellency William Ruto, in the open manner that I'm talking, aware that he or his people are listening, and we have mutual respect. That's what democracy is about. There is absolutely nothing with the Kenya. Kenyans are saying, we are waiting for you, William Ruto, to vote you in and out. And William Ruto's supporters are saying, I am not that pushover, Mtaniona. So we are committed to a democracy. Right? Yes, there are now these things that are beginning to become excess, and I'm sure we are going to talk about them.
Right.
Why our democracy is now beginning to go amok. And we have to talk about these things. But fundamentally, I am seated here, you are seated here, because we believe that we hold a common value. And that value is democracy. And democracy is about peace. That's it. So the moment you go beyond peace, and look at it, in Kenya, you arrest Natembea, you put him there, but you give him a bond. That's okay. We agree with that. If the state thinks that he's on the wrong or he uttered statements that are not good, we know even our opposition leaders sometimes are going excess and putting manner in a different way. Again, talking about diplomacy, going to hell and looking forward to the trip. Even our politicians need perhaps on both sides of the aisle need to master the language of, you don't pronounce the ultimate, that I'm going to bring thunder and limestone to upon you. You don't do that. So you keep it calm. We are in a democracy, and Wanjiku will decide at the end of the day. So Kenya and Tanzania are like heaven and earth.
Who's heaven?
No, I'm telling you, we have come over the 20 years. How many people have died in this country for us to be where we are? that whether you like it or don't like it, when William Ruto and his deputy fell out, Ruto did not do other things. He went to our institutions. Is that not what we're asking? Strengthen our institutions, let them do their job. Now it's upon us, because democracy is always work in progress, to judge the justice, the fairness, and the transparency of our institutions, and possibly where they go wrong. Remember, these were not, AI manipulated, robots.
This is real life.
This is real life, and these people are in parliament and they are voting, and they are voting as you watch, and you know who voted where and where. So that's what democracy is about. In Tanzania, this is different. Why? What is the problem with South Sudan, for example? It is because the Liberation Party did not transform or translate into a governing party. That's a problem. And the problem is that the ruling party in South Sudan is trapped in that particular situation where we have left the trenches of liberation. We are now in the trenches of governance, but you are afraid to enter the trenches of governance. You hang there. What is the problem with Sudan? The problem with Sudan is that there was a dictator, and the military did not agree with him. But the military itself was a creature of that dictator. So we have two forces. The Jeshi la Mzee on the one hand, and the former army, right? The Jeshi la Mzee has been written into the constitution. Now, what is the African position? The African position is we need a civilian government, right? And they bring Abdallah Hamdok as a civilian prime minister to head the government. Then the military come and topple him, right? And then there is no command between the military and the Jeshi la Mzee. And now the Arabs, the United Arab Emirates and others, in their wars in Yemen, had equipped this Jeshi la Mzee with the most sophisticated technology, including, what you call this, flying objects. It is the most equipped. Two, because they needed a large army from Africa, they created the largest militia. So RPF emerges as larger than the military, more equipped and more battle hardened. Yet they're not the military. So what happens? We have a crisis there. Can't Kenya's foreign policy advise the government that Sudan is a very complex problem, and that you cannot think that you are mediating between the military and the Jeshi la Mzee, because after you finish that, how are you going to bring the civilian? You need a more sophisticated approach, and that approach can only come from a sober Kenya that has the best and the ablest of its men and women in positions of authority.
Prof, is it a question of incompetence? Because because you've been around these corridors and you've met these individuals, when a government takes over power,
yes,
the assumption is, because we borrow a lot of our systems from developed countries, the assumption here is, for example, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, the incoming government receives a briefing. These are the foreign policies, and this is how we relate with this country A, country B, country C. So there are certain things you just can't cross, because these relations are built over time. Now, is it a question that these things do not happen in the Kenyan context, where an incoming government does not receive any briefing, so everybody vacates, the new government officials come in, the person who's going to be the CS comes in, they do the things the way they want to do? Or is it a question of having incompetent individuals or persons in those positions who don't articulate or don't know how to articulate our foreign policy?
What you're asking is true. I've studied the Kenyatta government, Jomo Kenyatta, studied the Moi government, I've studied the Kibaki government and Uhuru government very clearly. And in all these cases, there has been variations, but they follow each other. Okay. Why? Because it's about our national interest. That's our true north. Our national interest.
Always.
But when you subordinate foreign policy to individual interest, then we have a problem here. If you subordinate the foreign policy to the whims of your party alone, that's why we have a foreign policy bureaucracy. You can put a person on the top. That's what we're talking about, the people on the top, the managers of our foreign policy. But we have all the time being guided by our national interest. That's why Ethiopia to the north of us, I mean, it's a very good example of how a country can follow its national interest carefree. Ethiopia to the north, whether they have a monarch, whether they have a communist in power, or they have an insurgent like Meles Zenawi, they are our friends. Right? Because our national interest is that we have stability in the region, and the ally we chose was that. So over the last 60 years, we have transacted with a monarch, we have transacted with a communist, and we are the only known capitalist or market country in this region, and we have transacted with an insurgent. If Meles, because that's what Meles used to be.
Or within the country of Ethiopia.
Yeah, this is Ethiopia because that's in our national interest. Now, we went to Sudan to mediate, and our interests are who we are. And ultimately, together with our neighbors and everybody, we managed to broker that deal the way it ought to have been brokered. We can never find peace with the people who think that others are slaves and others are chattel for their own business. You can only separate the two for these to look for their own freedom. And we sought for freedom in South Sudan. We didn't break any bone. Why? Because we had people at the foreign policy bureaucracy, people who were drawn by Mzee Moi and later on, others, Kibaki, and put into this business. They babysitted. That's where Kalonzo Musyoka broke his teeth as an international diplomat. And he did a wonderful job like everybody else. So the point is, and this is what Lee Kuan Yew tells us, why a small island, which would qualify to be a big port, is now one of the most developed, most advanced, and most progressive country. I'm talking about Singapore.
Yeah.
He said, we are who we are because we put our best and our ablest to positions of authority. There is no alternative to that. You cannot become a superpower when you have crooks, cranks, and charlatans in your place.
Prof,
I want us to take a break. I want
Prof to answer me directly.
No,
Dennis. So is Mudavadi incompetent?
Dennis, I want us to take a break, please, because I will be at the break, and then we will come back, and then we can allow everything to happen. And I know that there are many things that need to come out through here, so let's just do that. We're having a conversation this morning easily about East Africa transnational repression is what we're looking at here. And Prof. Kagwanja said, you know what, mirroring or echoing the words of others, you cannot expect that you will see the best if you don't put the best in, isn't it? That's what we're looking at. And as you do that and take your break and do your shopping, Naivas Kikapu Kibonge is what we're asking you to remember this morning. Looking for value that stretches your shilling? Let Naivas be your home of deals. At Naivas, we know shopping isn't just about ticking off a list. It's about the experience. And that's why your Kikapu Kibonge is more than just a shopping basket. It's big, it's bountiful, and guess what? It never gets full. With unbeatable promotions, exclusive discounts, and everyday low prices, you just keep adding more and still spend less. So from farm fresh ingredients to those little household must-haves, everything you need is waiting at your nearest Naivas Kiloko. So come fill your Kikapu with value, variety, and the warmth of a true Kenyan shopping experience. Karibu Naivas, the home of deals.
This is the
Setup ndio show ninapenda. Fungua TV, keti kwa kiti, eka setup alafu feel inaweza. Uwezi fumble, uwezi gamble.
Vile watu wanaweka energy vizuri tamashani. Dance na mimi.
Ladies and gentlemen, they call me Joe the Best. That is JOEDBS-T. Remember, Straight Up Show, we bring you the A-list artists all around the globe, because this is how we roll. And when we talk about the movement, crazy energy, this is what I'm talking about right here on Straight Up Show.
DJ Tatua.
Vile watu wanaweka energy vizuri tamashani. Dance na mimi. Zoni gani wanaleta maiza mabani tunaka vizuri. Dance na mimi. Utani za kizimbi team, si lazima ni dingi. Utani kwa mabibi.
Tumeleta melody ya kusifu Mungu Baba, spiritually na body, injili na bamba, tumeleta melody, tumeleta melody.
Ni wewe naongelesha ndugu.
Mimi nilikuwa nafikiria ni kuimba unaimba.
Ni kuimba kweli naimba, lakini nakuuliza tena kazi iko waje?
Wewe ni nani unabeba hapa kama nani wewe?
Hii ni stage na si ya mtu.
Toka hapa.
Toka
hapa. Peter Kagwanja, we're having this conversation around the region, and before you went, everybody wanted to do something, say something.
Yeah, I wanted to one acknowledge.
Okay. I'd asked Prof a question, but I feel he's cut it around the issue. My question was, and maybe let me be direct: is Mudavadi incompetent, as in the position he's holding, or is he acting on orders from above?
Well, in professional matters, you don't work in order, from order. It's like a surgeon. Nobody will tell you where to cut. You are the one who is trained to know where to cut and where not to. So, my understanding of the art of professionalism is that you are the one who knows. When I go to class to teach at the university or wherever else I go, I prepare my notes and I'm looking at the minds that I'm going to talk to. If I'm going to teach, I've studied one class, about critical thinking, I'm not going to come with those heavy things that come from there because I know which tools to choose.
You know who your audience is.
Yeah, because I am the professional. So the question would be, am I a professional? And is Mudavadi a professional foreign minister or somebody who has been to that docket? No. Can he run the foreign ministry? Yes, he can, but not himself. Because to my understanding of this constitution and the maneuvering by our politicians in order to have their interest and our loyalties taken care of, we have maneuvered to have a chief cabinet secretary, which in simple language is a prime minister. Yeah, the minister on top of other ministers, the minister who look into the affair of
everybody else
to help President William Ruto function at the head of state, because the day-to-day nitty-gritties of cabinet are looked into. How can you be foreign minister and you are also the cabinet minister in a country of 50 million people and with 3,500 people in Muranga with degrees and no jobs, languishing in villages? Are we building the nation or we are dismantling the nation? What are we doing? So you are occupying two jobs. And the principle of the new constitution, Wanjiro, you know this, when we were doing it, the principle of this constitution is that no Kenyan hold two paying jobs because we don't have job for others. That's why the ministers stand alone and the parliamentarians stand alone. I grew knowing Michuki as a minister for interior those days with internal security, and knowing him as my MP in Kangema. We grew knowing Mzee Kenyatta as the MP for Gatundu and the President of the Republic of Kenya. We dismantled that. William Ruto is not the MP for Eldoret North. He's not. Or he's not an MP in Uasin. Why? It was by design. Why is Mudavadi holding two positions? That of foreign minister and that of prime minister. Why?
Prof, can I, you mean?
Prof,
yeah.
Prof, yeah. If I can answer that and then I'll ask my question. And I'll quote you because you, in your article on Sunday, you talked about a mongrel government that is going towards authoritarian and extortion, that is advancing an authoritarian and extortionist political party system.
Yep.
That is exercising a subtle form of authoritarianism in the country. And you said many other things.
Yep.
And of course, I think you're speaking in very diplomatic language. This is a master class. I hope they are listening. They actually should be sending something to your pay bill.
Maybe I'll get something in my account.
Maybe. But I think when you're talking about national interest, and you've said it very clearly, that our foreign policy is being driven by something other than national interest, some selfish personal interest, and it's not making sense. It's a little bit like we are watching what's happening in America, and we are seeing the reliability and the trust that was afforded the Americans in terms of being a good world neighbor is now gone.
Yep.
And you know, people are wondering how to respond to this. Similar to Kenya. Kenya has been that trusted leader in, like you said, we are not the best resourced state, but we've been a consistent, impartial leader showing that moral authority. Now that we are playing in, sometimes it seems mercenary, other times, like you said, it seems incompetent. In Tanzania, it's very hard to understand the actions of President Suluhu, because Tanzania has a history of actually supporting liberation movements. That's where they come from. And these are eminent Africans, eminent Kenyans who are shepherded out and humiliated. So it's not even So where are we going? What do you see playing out at the East Africa level? Are we seeing a kind of collusion to subvert the principles of the East African community? Is this... are you seeing that the current leadership is so afraid of the ground that they would rather bring down the charter and undermine it for the preservation of their interests at the country level? Yeah.
Interesting question, because we have two issues here. We have Kenya and where we are going. And I think I wrote that on Sunday and said our problem in Kenya is the party system, because it's the party system that's bringing back authoritarianism. Our constitution is intact, but we are spending too much time in court defending things we don't have to be defending, because they're supposed to be automatic, just like the sunshine will come tomorrow and so on. So there are too many crowds preventing us from enjoying the sun, and that's a problem with Kenya. And I think I doubt one, the party system. And this is not about President William Ruto's UDA or Kenya Kwanza. It is even worse in the opposition. Because if you are not towing the line in Nyanza, the consequences will be more dire than those of the state. At least President William Ruto and his men will arrest you. But in the village, they send goons or gunmen. So this is essentially what we're talking about. And I think it's a place we need to look into as experts, as advocates. We really need to look at the future of our party system, because it's the party that's the custodian of our interests.
Right.
It is the school where we teach patriotism to our kids, and it is the place where the Gen Zs will go to be tooled into leaders of tomorrow.
Indeed.
That's the nature of the party system. So the problem with Kenya's totalitarianism via the party, and two, the imagination of our communities, ethnic communities, as chattels of commodities of trade, where you put them in one basket called the party and hook them. And then therefore, here in Kenya, we have an imagination of the, what do you call that, Friday? Where we would sell slaves in America.
Yeah,
the Black Friday. Where we used to sell our slaves in the United States. So then somebody comes and asks Kalonzo Musyoka, I will never forget this. Kalonzo, you're asking to be deputy president. What are you bringing onto the table? And what is he asking Kalonzo? Should Kalonzo multiply the Kamba so that there are as many as the Kikuyus overnight, so that he can deserve to be the deputy president or vice president of the land? That was the most obnoxious question that ever came to my mind. And it's the one that gave birth to that article, that don't treat us like we are on that Black Friday where you are marketing us like horses and looking at our teeth, whether they are straight, sharp, or no, they are not
gapped,
silvery, or they have gap or whatever. Treat us as citizens of the Republic of Kenya, and people who have voting cards and the right by constitution to vote, irrespective of which community we come from. But the moment you organize political, the logic of a political organization is that of putting people into the basket and then hawking them at the end of the time for your own power. I find that very obnoxious.
While those things are happening in the country, while those things are happening in the country, I don't think we can run away from what the perception is outside the country. And some of these things were very clear in the expression of President Samia Suluhu. That she essentially said, and I think Dennis gave the translation directly from Kiswahili, that we can see what has happened in Kenya. Don't essentially bring that mess here.
I understand. That's why I was coming now after dealing with the Kenyan problem. And I say what the Kenyan problem is. It's very unique. But that does not mean we are not a democrat. We are democracy. Because we are here this morning defending our democracy. That's why I woke up in the morning to work for Kenya and defend our democracy. You can do whatever you want to do with us, but we will speak because we bought the right to speak. That's it. Now, in Tanzania, let me go back. I said Tanzania is in 1991-1993 period in our government, where you think that you are the island of peace, in a sea of turbulence. That's Mzee Moi. And that you think you are the prince or the princess of peace. And therefore you can talk others down. Kenya is not in the same league with the Tanzania. Tanzania is stuck in the politics of the 60s with one party that tell people when to jump and when to squat.
And what
we have a problem. We have a problem. Namibia has a liberation party, but it's not behaving like that.
I need to be very clear. What was the zeitgeist in that time when we were saying we're stuck in the 60s? What was happening at that time that would say that's why Tanzania is still in the 1990s?
In the 60s, and I tried to explain it on Sunday, we had this concept called the mass party. And the concept of mass party, Jomo Kenyatta would explain it as, I remember his statement was so eloquent and so well articulated. He said, "My people, I have been to the east and have been to the west. Democracies are as old as the hills. The newest thing in our lives is the mass party, where opposition and government sit in the government. Everybody, in other words, we oppose." Well, I can understand philosophically as an anthropologist. Jomo Kenyatta was speaking to our own culture, our philosophical foundations, the Ubuntu, as we talk about it. That we sit under a tree, talk and talk and talk until we agree. The Greek kind of democracy. That's what Kenyatta was speaking to. And he was right, because that's who we are. However we want to look at ourselves, opposition is always not sitting in very well, because we would like to talk the opposition into agreeing, and therefore we move together. But if we don't agree, then there must be the opposition. That's the logic. In Tanzania, they are stuck in that model. But there was a difference here. The person of Nyerere was very pragmatic, very flexible. And he understood that the ultimate thing for the African people is freedom. It is not the party structures. And it's freedom from political oppression and so on. And therefore, he welcomed the Black Panther when they were oppressed in the United States. And the leadership of Black Panther lived in South Africa, in Tanzania for the years. He welcomed all the big minds that could not fit into the islands of East Indies. Walter Rodney and others. They came and lived in Tanzania and actually taught there. He welcomed Kenyan labors. I know if you ask Makamu Tua, where he passed from, he passed through Tanzania to go to exile. Whenever we had our mess here and want to seek a country of refuge, we all went to Tanzania, including the coup makers of 1982. They went there. The students who were accused by government of supporting the military actually went through Tanzania and so on. So Tanzania has been the haven under Nyerere. It became heaven after Mwinyi and Mkapa, because they kept that tradition. And within Tanzania, they also allowed space for people to expand. And we ourselves admired them because they had mobilized their ethnicity. No, I mean, you know, if you ask me what Magufuli tribe was, I'll tell you he was. It was, you know, if you ask Mama Suluhu what tribe he is. But in Tanzania, the tribe is not as important because it has not been brought into the political equation. What they have brought into the political equation is the party. Now, the successors of Mkapa, Mwinyi, and Jakaya Kikwete, authoritarianism started with the Jakaya Three, but Jakaya was still in that old Nyererian tradition.
Of socialism.
Nyererian tradition of tolerance. Tolerance. So the opposition thrived under Mkapa, the opposition in Tanzania thrived under Mwinyi, and Jakaya Kikwete started now cramming on it. The person who came hard on is Magufuli, the late. And now, Mama Suluhu is seeking re-election and therefore does not want to see any opposition anywhere. This is the problem. And the best heir to Nyerere in East Africa is Yoweri Museveni. He has also taken to the Magufuli culture of you will be elected in a democracy, but you want to break the limbs of your opponent. So that by the time he's coming to the ring, he's limping his way through and you are sprinting your way through. This is the logic of Suluhu. So when she says that Kenya tumepoteza, we are whatever, she's simply arrogant. Kenya is 20 years older than Tanzania in politics. Because I can tell President Ruto something and he'll take his cup of tea and go on. Now, this is not Suluhu. You say that and all the party goons and everybody are on you. Now, imagine this is a government that wants to assassinate the leader of opposition. So at least we can tell her if she's harmed in Tanzania, she can come to Kenya for treatment. Because all the people who don't get it well in Tanzania. Now, in Zanzibar, if we're talking about Zanzibar, Zanzibar is basically, a volcano waiting to erupt. And it has been like that. I was an expert when the Tanzanians were discussing their constitution in 2015, and we wrote a book on it, as 100 scholars. We wrote a book on that. And I spoke to the party. And we were talking about what Kenya has achieved and how we can help Tanzania get that. And now the ticket and everything and upkeep was paid by the government of Tanzania. Therefore, they do admit that we have made reaps. I'm saying this for Wanjiro, because you might think the statements like those ones from Tanzania might make you feel small, like you have not achieved anything. No, we have achieved a lot. The point is, we are aiming higher. We want William Ruto to be the best leader that the world has produced. And we're asking, we can help you. But if he doesn't want to be helped by Kenyans and want to do his own thing, we'll also tell him that Kenya is not a one-man show. It's our show. And that is what democracy is essentially about. It's not about abusing somebody. That's why I'm saying I don't agree with the rhetoric that is beginning to get into our social media and also our public. We need to have hygiene in our public discourse. Nice. Because we need to know what we are achieving. It is not making Ruto angry. It is not making him bitter. It's about getting him to change and to understand who we are. Maybe he does not understand that perspective because of where he comes from. So language here matters. That's why I say, like, for example, I'm telling Mudavadi, he's a very competent person. I've known him all the days of my life, from the university days to today. He's a very competent person. But you can be promoted into incompetence. Being promoted into incompetence is being put in a place where you are not working to your optimum. To your utmost.
The treatment or the mistreatment of Martha Karua, Dr. William Tunga, what does it say in terms of how we treat our eminent persons? What does it say for intellectualism under this kind of thinking that we are seeing with William Ruto and Madam Suluhu?
We need to...